Hi there, I'm breaking news reporter Andrew Ford here again with Kepler Funk. Big day in court today for the trial of the man accused of shooting Brevard County Sheriff's Deputy Barbara Pill. I think we heard from 10 witnesses in all.
Is that what it was? Wow.
Highlights today, let's start right off. There was a photo shown to jurors of Pill after her death and video from the dash cam of Pill's car as well as the first deputy to find her. What do you think is the impact of evidence like that? It's graphic evidence kind of on the face of it. What does that mean?
Well, look, I mean, we were anticipating the dash cam video ever since jury selection. Remember, we talked about how important it is for the lawyers to kind of take the wind out of that sail, if possible, but to kind of warn these jurors that they're going to see a very graphic video. I mean, it shows the murder of a law enforcement officer. It's horrific on its face. We're going to find out what kind of impact it's had on these jurors. I'll tell you what, I was a little surprised today. I was really watching these jurors when that video was being played. Pretty stoic group. Now, that doesn't mean that those emotions aren't running deep. Sometimes jurors don't feel comfortable with, expressing themselves emotionally in an open courtroom. So it had an impact, there's no doubt about it, and bad for the defense for sure.
Two of the more interesting witnesses were Andrea Kirchner, the co-defendant, who was riding in the passenger seat with Brandon Bradley, and Jeffrey Dieguez, who said he was on the phone with Kirchner at the time of the shooting. What do you think their importance is in the state's case?
You called them interesting, and that's an understatement. Mr. Dieguez went first. He was an interesting fella. I think Mr. Lanning did a superb job cross-examining him to the point where I was wondering whether the state should have even called him as a witness. I don't even know if they really needed him. The problem was, on the re-cross-examination, kind of the fourth go-round for lawyers, Mr. Dieguez helped out the state with his testimony. He kind of gave it back to Mr. Lanning. I was waiting for it. He kind of gave it back to him, and he used the phrase, "This is something I'll never forget as long as I live." That made me cringe as a defense lawyer. I'm sure it made the state smile. We go to Ms. Kirchner. Wow. Ms. Kirchner, at the beginning of this case, I wasn't so sure whether she would be a real impactful witness or as impactful as people were anticipating. I think now, after listening to her, she's got a huge impact. She provides premeditation. She's one of the two premeditation witnesses. She attributes statements to Mr. Bradley just prior to the shooting. In other words, the premeditation evidence is that Mr. Bradley said, "I'm not going back to prison, even if I have to shoot this law enforcement officer." Wow, was that powerful today. Huge impact. I think the defense did okay cross-examining her. See, here's the difference. She's sober today, and she's not a dumb girl. She's a pretty bright girl. She showed some remorse. She showed some regret. She seemed to not fight with the lawyers in answering. She seemed to be somewhat straightforward in her answers to the lawyers, a little different than Mr. Dieguez. I thought Ms. Kirchner did herself very well today.
Sure. What do you think are the goals for the defense going forward? I noticed they keep bringing up and kind of describing the drug state that Bradley and Kirchner were in.
Well, I think you're right, and your perception is right on the money. It's a point of the defense. I think what they're saying is that he didn't have the mental capability to have this kind of plan or premeditation that the government, that the state's saying that he had. Remember, we don't have diminished capacity in Florida, right? Some states where if your mental state is such that as a result of drug use or some other problem where you have a diminished capacity, right? You panic in the heat of the moment or something. We don't have that kind of law in Florida. In other words, if for a mental health defense, it's got to be insanity. We don't have insanity here. That's a really, really high burden. So the defense is somewhat squeezing in a diminished capacity defense to try to raise some doubt. Also, remember now, these lawyers are thinking about a penalty phase. So that drug use, that incapacity, if you will, by the voluntary drug use, that's going to go to mitigation in the penalty phase. So while they're talking about the guilt phase now, remember, these lawyers are smart. They're thinking about penalty phase arguments also.
Sure thing. Thanks very much for joining us, and remember to keep tuning in. Again, I'm Andrew Ford, reporting for Florida Today.